The CDC warned everybody not to go on a cruise ship last week, and I've got my thoughts on what this really means up next. Hey everyone, it's Matt from RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com, and certainly last week was not a great week for the cruise industry. Chief among the things that came up last week was the CDC urging all travelers, whether they're vaccinated or not, to avoid going on a cruise ship. Now, if you've been following the, let's call it drama, if you will, or the day-to-day things that have been happening in the cruise industry since about, March 2020, this is just another chapter in the book of what's happening with the cruise lines and as it relates to COVID-19. And today I wanted to share my thoughts and what you should really think about when it comes to the CDC's new warning. Now, I have to say off the bat, I am not a public health expert. I am not a scientist. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a nurse. I'm just some guy who writes about cruises on a blog. So my opinion is just that, my opinion, and please consult your own doctors and public health officials for those kinds of, direction in terms of what you should or should not do. I just wanted to take a look at what the CDC said and share my thoughts upon it and whether or not that factors into your decision or not. Because, of course, at the end of the day, when the CDC says something, it gets a lot of attention. Basically, what happened was the CDC raised its level warning from level 3 to level 4 of telling the public that they should not go on a cruise ship whether they're vaccinated or not. The CDC has 4 levels that it categorizes in terms of danger levels, if you will, for destinations, U.S. territories, and whatnot, and cruise ships, I guess, in this case. And levels are level 1 low, level 2 moderate, level 3 high, and level 4 very high. And this is not the first time the CDC has issued such a high warning. It did so in November 2020 before lowering it to level 3 in June 2021. So what did the CDC say? Basically, the CDC is saying that all travelers should avoid cruise travel because of the increase in COVID-19 cases on board cruise ships due to the Omicron variant. According to the agency, even those who've been fully vaccinated and boosted should reconsider cruising. And just like before, the CDC's big issue with cruising and why it thinks that there's a heightened risk with COVID-19 is the tight quarters you have on board a cruise ship. Now, that's what the CDC said. And almost immediately, the cruise industry responded back with a big what? In a statement by the Cruise Line International Association, CLIA, which represents many cruise lines, including Royal Caribbean, said the decision by the CDC to raise the travel level for cruises is particularly perplexing, considering that cases identified on cruise ships consistently make up a very slim minority of the total population on board, far fewer than on land. And the majority of cases are asymptomatic or mild in nature, posing little to no burden on medical resources on board or on shore. That's a quote, by the way. So that's what the cruise industry said, which kind of echoes what I was thinking about when looking at this announcement. First and foremost, there was a level 3 warning and now there's level 4 warning. And if you can honestly tell me what the difference between a level 3 and a level 4 warning are, then you are a smarter person than I am, because quite frankly, it's almost meaningless in the sense that there's been a warning. There's now a heightened warning relative to what it was before. But the CDC was hardly advocating anybody go on a cruise, even at level 3. They're just simply saying they don't think anybody should go on there regardless of vaccination status. And that's really the crux of the change. Previously, the CDC was saying if you're fully vaccinated, that's a better idea than being unvaccinated going on a cruise. And now they're just simply saying you shouldn't go on a cruise regardless of your vaccination status. Now, as someone who's been on many, many cruises, including a cruise I just got back off of during this day and age of the Omicron variant, I can say that I felt far safer on a cruise ship than I did anywhere else, including the airport. My goodness, we were in LAX, and that place was an absolute zoo with no social distancing, very little protocols. And when I say very little, all you had to do was wear a mask, and even that was kind of questionable on some folks in there. But regardless, I felt much safer because of the stringent protocols that the cruise industry has. If you're going on a cruise ship, number one, everybody above the age of 12 has to be fully vaccinated. And now that kids can be fully vaccinated, you've got basically, according to Royal Caribbean, about 95 to 98% of the passengers on board fully vaccinated. Number two, and I think even more important, is that every single person has to be tested before you get on board a ship. Royal Caribbean and all the cruise lines require every passenger to do a COVID test 2 or 3 days before their cruise. That is something that you just don't get anywhere else. On top of that, you've got social distancing, mask requirements, and a commitment to their passengers that they do get sick, Royal Caribbean will take care of them in the sense of treatment on board, and they're going to get them home in terms of isolation, quarantine, and transportation back home, all at Royal Caribbean's expense. These are things that no other industry does right now, whether you're going to a city, whether you're going on an airplane, whether you're going to a resort. Basically, if you catch COVID anywhere else, you're kind of on your own in that sense, because these companies are not taking care of their guests as the cruise lines are. It's clear the cruise industry is going above and beyond what any other company is putting out there. I challenge anybody in the comments, tell me, is any other company, it's not a cruise line, that will take care of you in that way if you actually contract COVID. Never mind the fact that requiring testing and a vaccine mandate and the masks and everything else on top of all that, there's a lot that's there. According to the CDC, when they put out this change, cases reported on cruise ships had increased 31% over the last 2 weeks before that. This compares to the overall rate of infection in the United States, which has increased 153% over the same time period. Although it's likely a steeper difference, as we know that testing rates are far higher on cruise ships than they are in the general population. Truly, when you look at this change with the CDC warning, all this tells me something we've already known, which is that the cruise industry is held to a double standard compared to other forms of leisure travel. In fact, just days before the CDC upped its warning about cruise ships, it actually reduced the quarantine requirements for airlines from 10 to 5 days in an effort to loosen the COVID-19 exposure requirements at the behest of the airline industry. The airlines actually asked the CDC to lower the requirements, make it less stringent, and the CDC said, sure, no problem. And then they turn around and make it more stringent on the cruise lines, which have far stricter requirements on their COVID-19 protocols. In fact, the airline industry has been fighting tooth and nail to avoid any kind of protocols that the cruise industry has for its cruise ships. This is obviously double standard. And yes, I'm completely biased on this because I'm a huge cruise fan, but it's hard to look at the two and say, wait, you can do this, but not that in this current state of time? That's the most perplexing thing about what's going on right now. According to the CDC, the guidance that shortened the recommended time for isolation for all people with asymptomatic cases of COVID, vaccinated or not, on airlines was saying that the change was, quote, motivated by science demonstrating that the majority of SARS-CoV-2 transmission occurs early in the course of the illness, generally in the first 1 to 2 days prior to the onset of symptoms, and the 2 to 3 days after. The agency also shortened the quarantine period for people exposed to COVID. This is all for airlines, and it just makes you scratch your head as to why that's okay for one form of leisure travel, but not the other. And that, of course, is what leads me to why I'm talking about this particular change today and what it means to you if you have a cruise going forward. Certainly, as I kind of alluded to earlier, the difference between a level 3 warning and a level 4 warning is utterly meaningless, I think, to the general public. All that means is the CDC once again said they don't think anybody should go on a cruise ship, which is just questionable because they're okay with other forms of leisure travel. Of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that the CDC has jurisdiction over the cruise lines and not the airline industry, and that's why we don't see airlines reporting COVID cases like they do on the cruise industry ships. I think the bottom line truly is if you have a cruise booked or you're thinking about booking a cruise anytime during the COVID-19 pandemic, you should be aware of the risks that are there and certainly be okay if you encountered any of those kind of issues. No one wants to think about that, but you have to think worst case scenario, and risk mitigation is something that I think a lot of folks have to consider when they do anything in life right now, including going on a cruise. And I would be the first to admit that a cruise may not be right for everybody as it is right now. Certainly there are a lot of protocols in place, and some of these protocols are not quite ideal from a guest experience standpoint, certainly having to wear masks, ports of calls being canceled, different social distancing protocols, and even some venues and entertainment not being offered on board can sour the experience. But for some people, they may say, I just want to be on a cruise ship. I enjoy that kind of vacation, and being on board is worth it regardless of the changes that are there because we're making changes in everything that we're doing in life. And I would certainly be in that camp. There are some folks who might say, you know what, I might like a cruise or I did enjoy going on a cruise, but I'm going to wait for things to loosen up a little bit. And certainly that's the kind of debate and talk you have to have with yourself, whether or not it makes sense. I really don't think the warning from the CDC changes anything fundamentally. Certainly the Omicron variant should not become a surprise to anybody who's around right now. I mean, it's really affecting all factors of life currently. But I think what you have to remember is that the cruise lines have the most stringent protocols out there, period, end of story. That's an undeniable fact. And to you, it really boils down to how comfortable are you with these changes and the risks that are associated with going on a cruise. Keeping in mind there are risks with everything out there, whether you're going to a city, a park, or anywhere else in life, the supermarket, there are risks involved. And for me, I decided, you know what, I'm not going to sit back anymore. I'm vaccinated. I'm boosted. My kids are fully vaccinated. We're going to get out there. We're going to take proper precautions. We're not just going to be cavalier with everything, and that's also really important. But we're going to follow what the cruise lines are recommending. We're going to take certain precautions, whether it's masks or social distancing or avoiding certain scenarios, and enjoy our cruise. And being on board, especially at sea, is still a wonderful family vacation. I'd love to hear in the comments below, what do you think of the CDC warning change and how does it affect your decision to go on a cruise or not? Are you canceling your cruise? Are you keeping your plans in place? Let me know in the comments below. If you found this video helpful, Be sure to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and turn on your notifications. That's that little bell icon next to the subscribe button, so that way YouTube lets you know when we have a brand new video to share. This has been Matt from RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com, and we'll talk again real soon.